Did you ask the owner of the house for permission? I asked my daughter-in-law with the suitcases. The question left my mouth with a calm I hadn't expected. I had just opened the door to my condo, grocery bags still dangling from my arms, and there she was. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, standing right in the middle of my living room as if it were nothing. There were 2 enormous suitcases at her feet and an expression that mixed surprise with something worse. Annoyance. As if I were the intruder, as if my arrival had ruined her perfectly laid plans. She looked up at me, blinked twice, and then let out that uncomfortable little laugh she used whenever someone confronted her, a short, sharp sound designed to make the other person feel ridiculous. But I didn't look away. I stood there on the threshold of my own home, holding the heavy bags filled with produce and canned goods, waiting for an answer she clearly hadn't prepared. "Hey, Ava. I didn't hear you come in." Her voice was light, almost musical, as if we were discussing the weather, as if the suitcases didn't exist, as if it were completely normal for her to be in my condo on a Thursday afternoon without warning, without asking, without the slightest consideration that this was my space, my refuge. I didn't move. I stayed in the doorway, feeling the weight of the bags beginning to leave red marks on my forearms. Something inside me had hardened the exact moment I saw those suitcases. Something that had been soft, pliable, always ready to give in for years, had finally found a boundary. "I asked you a question, Chloe." My voice came out firmer this time. She tucked a strand of her perfectly styled hair behind her ear, that gesture she made when she needed to stall. Her eyes, painted with light shadows that matched her designer blouse, avoided mine before returning with that small, condescending smile I despised. "Ava, please don't exaggerate. David and I only need to stay for a few days. They're doing renovations in our condo, and the noise is unbearable. The crew starts at 6 a.m. We figured it wouldn't be a problem to come here. After all, you live alone, and you have 2 bedrooms you don't even use." There it was. That sentence that perfectly summed up what my family thought of me. You live alone, and you have rooms you don't use. As if my life were an empty space waiting to be filled by the needs of others. As if my 68 years of existence didn't grant me the right to decide how, when, or with whom to share my space. I finally walked in and set the bags on the dining room table with a thud. Chloe took a barely perceptible step back. "Does David know you're here?" I already knew the answer. "Of course he knows, Ava. It was his idea. He's finishing up at the office. I thought he'd have called to tell you." He didn't call. That silence told me everything. My son, David, the child I'd raised alone after his father left when he was 7. The same one I'd fed with the salary from my double shifts. That son now considered it perfectly acceptable to move into my house without consulting me. I walked toward the suitcases. Expensive, shiny new. "And you just thought this was okay? Showing up without considering that maybe I value my privacy." Chloe crossed her arms. "Ava, you're David's mother. We're family. It's only for a week. I thought you'd be happy to have company. You always say this place feels empty." "Empty?" The word echoed. Yes, I had once mentioned the silence after my sister moved out last year. But there was a universe of difference between silence and empty. My house was silent because I chose it that way. Chloe had taken a moment of vulnerability and turned it into a justification. "Listen to me closely." My voice was low but firm. "This house can feel however it wants to feel to me. But what it will never be is available without my permission. I am the owner, Chloe, not a convenient option." At that moment, we heard a key in the lock. The door opened and David walked in, carrying 2 more bags, wearing his carefree smile. "Mom, glad you're home. Chloe explained it, right? We'll only be here a week, 2 at most. You won't even notice we're here." He set the bags down and looked at me with the expression he'd had at 12, expecting no consequences. But David was 42 now, and I was no longer that exhausted young mother too tired to fight. He tried to kiss my cheek. I didn't lean in. "What's wrong, Mom?" "Bad day." "I didn't have a bad day, David. I had an unpleasant surprise when I got home to find your wife moving in without anyone asking if I agreed." He chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, please don't be dramatic. I called you twice this morning. You didn't answer. I figured we could get settled. It's not that big of a deal. You called twice, and when I didn't answer, you decided that was authorization to move into my house." We're not moving in. We're just staying a few days. He walked to my refrigerator, opened it, and took a bottle of water I'd bought that afternoon, drinking straight from it. That small, casual gesture felt like a confirmation. He saw no difference between his space and mine. How many days is a few days, David? He shrugged. A week. 2 at most. The crew will finish fast. 2 weeks. 14 days of disrupted routine, lost privacy, and sacrificed peace. And you just assumed I'd be okay with that? Mom, you're my mother. Of course I assumed you'd be okay. What did you want us to do? Stay in a hotel and spend $150 a night when you have empty rooms here? That doesn't make sense. There was the naked truth. It wasn't about needing me. It was about economic convenience. I was expected, as always, to place their financial needs above my emotional tranquility. Chloe cleared her throat. Ava, if it's a problem, we can help with expenses. Maybe 50 extra for utilities. It's not about money, Chloe, I said, my voice wearier than intended. David put a hand on my shoulder. Then what is it about, Mom? Tell me what you need and we'll do it. Buy groceries? Clean. Be quiet. Just tell us. What I needed was for them to have asked first. What I needed was for them to understand that being family didn't mean automatic, unilateral access to my life. I gently moved his hand from my shoulder. What I need, David, is for you to understand that this is my house, not a hotel. It's the place where I have the right to decide who enters and who stays. But we're your family, Mom. Precisely because you are my family, this hurts more. I would expect you, more than anyone, to understand that I also have a right to my space, to my peace, to my decisions. David exchanged a glance with Chloe, that quick, united look when facing a shared problem. In that moment, I was the problem. Fine, Mom, he sighed, a gesture of frustration. You're upset we didn't give notice, but we're already here. Chloe's already unpacked in the guest room. What do you want us to do? Look for a hotel at 6 p.m. on a Thursday. Guilt, presented as practical inconvenience. As if their lack of planning now obligated me. I walked down the hall and pushed open the guest room door. Clothes were on the bed. Toiletries lined the dresser. Her laptop was plugged in by the nightstand. This wasn't preparation for a short stay, this was an installation. I turned to David in the doorway. A week, you said. And all of this is for a week. Chloe needs to work from here. We brought what we needed to be comfortable. Comfortable. They needed to be comfortable in my space. I just needed to be understanding. I returned to the living room. Chloe was now sitting in my favorite armchair by the window, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she offered that smile again. Ava, we really will be as little trouble as possible. You won't even notice we're here. I walked up to the armchair and stood there, looking at her until, awkwardly, she stood up. I'm sorry. Did you want to sit here? I didn't. I wanted her to understand that every inch of this place was mine. Mom, can we talk? Just you and me. David asked from the kitchen doorway. Maybe in private, he would hear me. We went to the kitchen. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Talk. What is really bothering you? You bother me, David. It bothers me that you grew up thinking my life is a resource available when you need me, but not a priority for basic consideration. He frowned, genuinely confused. I don't understand. When was the last time you visited me without needing something from me? The question hung in the air. He opened his mouth, then closed it, searching his memory. The fact he couldn't find an example was its own answer. I come see you often. You come when you need a dog sitter. When you need documents held. When you need a place to crash after a fight. When was the last time you came just to see me? To be interested in my life? That's not fair. I call you. I invited you to dinner last week. You invited me because it was Chloe's birthday and you needed someone else to pay the bill. You two argued about your vacation plans the whole time while I ate in silence. Why didn't you say anything? Because I never say anything, David. Because when I do, I'm told I'm overreacting. So I stopped. I stopped expecting to be more than functional to you. He shook his head in frustration. This is ridiculous. You're making this huge. We just need temporary help. And it never occurred to you that maybe I have a life, too? Plans. A routine I enjoy and don't want to give up because you decided to renovate. What plans, Mom? What do you do all day that's so important you can't share your space with your family? There it was. To him, I did nothing important. I just existed in a state of constant availability. I don't have to justify my days to you, David. The fact that I want to be alone in my own house should be reason enough. He laughed humorlessly. So you're saying you'd rather be alone than help your own son? Your comfort is more important than your family's needs. I'm saying you should have asked me before assuming. You should have given me the option to say yes or no. You should have treated me with the same respect you treat anyone else you were asking a huge favor of. It's not a huge favor. It's letting your son sleep in your guest room. It's giving up my privacy for 2 weeks. It's sharing every space where I breathe. It's giving up the peace that cost me years to achieve. David looked at the ceiling, then back at me, tired. You know what? The real problem is you've been alone too long. You've become selfish. You weren't like this before. You always had your doors open. For my friend Marcus, for Aunt Olivia. You never complained. I remembered. I remember the exhaustion, the resentment, the feeling of being invisible. I had learned that women like me existed to be needed, not to need. You're right, David. I didn't say anything before. I swallowed it all and smiled. I believed being good meant constantly sacrificing. But I got tired. Tired of being the convenient solution. Tired of my generosity being taken for granted. We did ask what you needed, Mom. We just asked you. You asked after you'd already decided, after you'd already settled in. That's not asking. That's asking for retroactive permission. I walked out, the tension in the living room now a thick, palpable thing. Chloe finally broke the silence, her voice careful. Ava, if you really don't want us to stay, we can find another solution. I looked at David, expecting support. He looked away, jaw tight. My son wasn't going to defend me. To him, my deviation from the pattern was a flaw to be corrected. I sat in my armchair, suddenly exhausted. I want an honest answer. If I showed up at your condo with my bags, saying I needed to stay 2 weeks, would you welcome me without a second thought? The glance they exchanged was all the answer I needed. Chloe spoke first. We'd have to think. Our place is smaller. It would be complicated. Exactly. It would be complicated. You'd consider your needs. And you'd be within your rights. No one would call you selfish. But you're my mother, Mom. It's different, David said. Why? Because I'm your mother. Do my needs matter less? Does that mean I can be taken for granted? I'm not saying that. But you're demonstrating it. I stood and walked to the suitcases. They represented decades of unestablished boundaries. I had taught him my space was a space. I had created this. Mom, please, David said, hand on my shoulder. We just want a place to sleep. We're not trying to take anything from you. But they were. They were taking my right to say no. I moved my shoulder away. This is my house, David. I pay the rent. I decide who comes in. And right now, I'm deciding I need you both to leave. The silence was absolute. David stared, hands still suspended. What did you say? I need you to take your things and leave. You're joking. I'm not. Chloe stepped forward, desperate. Ava, wait. We can fix this. We're family. Precisely because you're family, this hurts. I would expect you to understand I deserve to be treated with dignity. David laughed, sharp with disbelief. This is insane. You're kicking your own son out? For not following some ridiculous protocol. Asking before moving in isn't a protocol. It's basic respect. It's what you do with anyone else. I can't believe this. After everything we've done for you. What, David? What exactly have you done that justifies this invasion? We bought you that TV. We drove you to the ER. A gift you held over me. A ride where you dropped me at the door and left. That's not care. That's obligation. He stepped closer, eyes bright with rage. You know your problem? Nothing is ever enough. You're punishing me because your life didn't turn out how you wanted. Because Dad left. Because you're lonely. Now, when I finally ask a favor, you collect emotional debts from decades ago. His words were blows, each designed to hurt, to make me doubt. And they did. There was truth there. But it didn't change my right to my space. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My life didn't turn out how I wanted. The part where I raised a son who sees me as a resource, not a person. The part where I spent so long being useful, I forgot how to be valued. Ava, please, Chloe pleaded, tears now real. Kicking your son out is cruel. Cruel? Is it cruel to protect my space, but not cruel to show up unannounced? Not cruel to treat me as invisible? David grabbed a suitcase. You know what? We're leaving. I don't need to be where I'm not welcome. He headed for the door, Chloe following with the other bag. She turned at the threshold. I hope your peace is worth losing your son over. My son is not lost because I set a boundary. If he leaves, it's because he chose his comfort over our relationship. David stopped in the hallway, turned, and let out a bitter laugh. Wait until I tell everyone. Wait until Aunt Olivia hears how the generous Ava got so selfish she won't help her own son. The threat hung in the air, the old weight of guilt pressed down, the instinct to yield, to apologize, to keep the peace at all costs. Then I remembered my friend Serena, 3 months before she died, holding my hand in her hospital room. The biggest mistake I made, she'd whispered, was caring more about what people thought of me than what I thought of myself. I spent 70 years trying to be what others needed. Now, I can't remember a single moment I lived for myself. Those words had rung in my head since her funeral. Now, facing my son's threat, I understood. The moment had come to decide what mattered more. Go ahead, David. Tell them your version. But we both know the truth. He slammed the suitcase down. You know why I didn't ask? Because I never thought I'd have to ask my own mother. Because you taught me these doors were always open. Then I taught you wrong. I taught you love meant unlimited access. That being family meant I had no right to say no. Now I'm correcting that mistake. Chloe was crying. Please, let's find a solution. You need a place to stay. I need my space. Those two things are not compatible. David picked up the suitcase again, cold and distant. When you change your mind, don't expect me to come back as if nothing happened. He stepped out. Chloe looked at me, utterly confused. What kind of mother does this? The kind who finally learned that loving herself isn't selfishness. It's survival. She left. I stood on my doorstep, watching them wait for the elevator. David's back was rigid with betrayal. The doors opened. He entered without looking back. Chloe followed. Just before the doors closed, David finally looked at me. The expression was pure, pained incomprehension. Part of me screamed to run after them, to apologize, to take it all back. That part trained over decades to prioritize others' comfort over my own. I didn't move. The doors closed. The mechanical hum of descent faded. I went inside and closed my own door. The silence that greeted me was heavy with consequences. I walked to the guest room and began carefully folding Chloe's clothes, placing toiletries in a bag, unplugging the laptop. I did it not with cruelty, but to reclaim the space. To make it empty again by my choice. Later, I sat in my armchair by the window as night fell. My phone vibrated with a message from David. Hope you're happy. I wasn't happy, but I felt a terrible, necessary clarity. For the first time in decades, I had chosen my dignity. Another message from Chloe. David is very upset. I hope your pride is worth it. I turned off the phone. I needed silence. In the days that followed, the guilt slowly began to transform. It wasn't happiness, but a dawning peace, like setting down a burden carried for too long. A month later, at the market, David called. Not a text. A call. Hi, Mom. Hello, David. I've been thinking. You were right. Not about everything, but about the main thing. I showed up without asking. I took you for granted. That wasn't okay. The relief was a physical unclenching in my chest. Thank you for saying that. Chloe said she's always felt I treat your generosity like an obligation. She's right. Mom, can we have lunch? Just us. To talk. I'd love that. We met the following Saturday. The conversation was clumsy at first, but real. He apologized. He saw me, not just as his mother, but as Ava. It wasn't a perfect fix. Old patterns sometimes resurfaced. But the difference was I now had a voice, and he was learning to listen. I learned that teaching respect to your children doesn't end when they grow up. Sometimes the most important lesson comes when you finally say no. When you finally choose yourself. That Thursday afternoon with the suitcases wasn't the end of our relationship. It was the beginning of a new one, built on honesty instead of obligation, mutual respect instead of unilateral sacrifice. Now, when I sit in my armchair with my coffee, looking at my quiet, tidy condo, I feel something new, pride. Pride in having found my voice. Pride in having taught my son that real love includes boundaries. My house is still my house. My life is still my life. And I, Ava at 68, am finally the owner of both.